All right, is everybody ready? Yep. Okay, let's. It's all yours, Zoltan.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming today to hear me speak, and hopefully I can answer some questions for you as well. I do first want to warn you as well that I have a little bit of a strange situation today. One of my daughters got sick, and so she's home. So I have two young kids home with me, and usually it's not the case. But anyways, one I had to pick up from school today and bring her back. So there's a possibility that this could be interrupted for a minute or so, which you then could get some cute, I suppose, baby or children photos. My 4-year-old's probably going to wake up and want to come watch YouTube, but hopefully they may sleep. I'm not sure how many of you saw today that I had a big interview appear on Esquire, and then a few days ago one on Popular Science, and I must admit to you that I'm pretty taken back by a lot of the publicity that has been happening around the Transhumanist Party, around my presidential campaign. It's a lot more than I would have suspected probably 2-3 months ago, and I know for a fact that we have a number of other really large places interested. The New Yorker, for example, a journalist wants to become embedded with us on our bus tour in the Telegraph. And anyways, the reason I'm mentioning this is I have been, the last week, sort of, the party itself has been transforming. What's happening is all of a sudden there's been a lot more donations. All of a sudden there's been a lot more followers on social media. All of a sudden there's been more interviews than I can actually handle. I'm now actually pushing some of the interviews to our communications people. So whatever is happening, it's been great. It's growing like wildfire. Now, of course, whether that turns into voters or that just turns into people that want to see what's going on, that's a whole different story. So I'll back up a little bit and just give you, a little bit of the history of why I started the party and what I think its future is. Approximately 2 years ago, a little bit more, 2.5 years ago, I released my book, The Transhumanist Wager, and the book is a philosophical manifesto about a character who wants to live forever, using science and technology. It's become known as a bit of an authoritarian book and a libertarian book, and it gets me in a lot of trouble, and I'm not exactly that close with it anymore now that I'm doing the political thing. That said, it did help to launch, I think, sort of where I am now. And the reason that's important is that about a year ago, after kind of a bunch of publicity about the book, I said, well, what is it that I could do for transhumanism now? What is it that actually the movement itself needs? And I think that's where I came up with the idea of the Transhumanist Party, which in itself isn't, a very novel idea. I think all movements strive to have a political element to their goals, to their ambitions. And so I had thought about it a lot. How do you form a party? What are the parameters? Do you have membership open or closed? We currently have a membership that's sort of, you just support it. And one of the reasons why is that if you don't have enough supporters, it can often look bad, especially if you're being covered by major media. It's hard to start a party and get a huge amount of members on board without, I'd say, a lot of funding. And right now, the Transhumanist Party doesn't have that much funding. We have enough funding for basic infrastructure, telephone, internet, signs, banners, a bus tour, which is quite expensive. It's mostly where the funding is planning on going at the moment. But it's not this, we stepped in and someone gave us a $100,000 or $500,000 check, and that's how we started. We started as a very kind of grassroots, bare bones type of organization for officers, a number of volunteers, and that was just 6 months ago. But the main idea is that the Transhumanist Party is supposed to fill this political need, especially with the elections coming. And then, with a vote with the officers, we had nominated me to be the presidential candidate since I had, access to the most media and publicity. And, the party has then since been off. And frankly, it's growing rapidly. I have more emails and volunteers than I really can handle anymore. I'm not even able necessarily to really interact with people as I used to. So if you don't see me answering something on Facebook, I apologize. 2 months ago, I still had the time to do it, but I'm no longer really able to do it. I wake up at 6 in the morning, and it's basically a campaign, like just pushing for press, pushing for development of the bus tour, which is very complex because it requires setting up, places, getting radio stations involved. It's a whole 9 yards to kind of coordinate all this. And everyone at the party is on a volunteer basis, including myself. There's nobody that's paid. Nobody's paid anything. So any kind of donations we get are directly go right into the movement and into growing the party itself. So it's hard with volunteers to get people to follow through. Generally, we've been asking everyone that wants to volunteer that they could do 5 hours a week. That's enough, and that's great. And so going back a little bit, the party established itself, and within a month, of course, the first month everyone said, "Oh, okay, the Transhumanist Party, this is great. Let's talk about it. What can it do? Is it good or bad?" But the evolution of it has been something dramatically different than that very first month back in October. Now the Transhumanist Party is being taken as something real. I've been recently contacted by a number of other third parties that are putting together debates. We're hoping that we're going to be included. There's no guarantee of that yet, but certainly we're getting enough press and in making enough waves in media that we should probably be able to be included in some of the third-party debates. The last year's or 2012's third-party debate was hosted by Larry King, so it's a big thing to be involved in it, and it then would be shown broadly. The good thing really is that with so much media exposure, we have entered into a new phase where the parties, the legitimacy and the credibility of the party is no longer at question. Now, this was a very hard thing in the very first few months to deal with, is, well, what can a small party do? And, especially as I've admitted openly from the very beginning of founding the party, I never had a chance to win the presidential election. That, if anyone knows anything about politics, it's incredibly difficult, if at all, to get even a tiny 1% amount of the votes in the nation to become president. You're either a Republican or you're a Democrat. You're either the nominee or you're not, and those two people make the difference. On a rare occasion, if you get a billionaire to put in some money, you might get an independent who can change the voting situation a little bit, but it's not substantial, and it very rarely happens. So my goal with the party and my goal with the presidential campaign was not to win. My goal was to use it as a vehicle to spread a message. And that message, of course, is probably the same message we all have, which is we want to use science and technology to live longer, to live better, to reach some of these aspirations we have. Maybe that's becoming a robot. Maybe it's mind uploading for somebody. In my case, I'd like to make it so my family and my kids can live indefinitely as well. So we have a lot of reasons for pushing transhumanism forward. But the bottom line is that the Transhumanist Party has become a very powerful vehicle for doing that. And in fact, it's become so powerful that I think you're getting places like Esquire today, I'd say, it's not the largest of the magazines, but it's a large name. And them covering the transhumanism movement for the first time, at least the first time that I could see. I know they've mentioned the word here, but finally they did like a full article on it. And that's really great because a number of places are doing the same thing. Last week was Popular Science, and while they've covered transhumanism many times before, it's great to see full articles on it. And every single time you have a new media source reveal or do a story on it, you hit a whole brand new bunch of readers. In our community in Facebook, in the transhumanist kind of communities, Singularity Network, Scientific Transhumanism, all the large ones, it's kind of the same message going back and forth to the same people. They make up the core part of our movement. But it's great when you actually get to some news forms of media and people that maybe have heard of it or maybe don't know it, whatever it is, but they have it for the first time, and then they get totally introduced to it. And hopefully, the message has been good, and I think the political message is always interesting because somehow politics touches people deeply, for better or for worse. Sometimes it makes them crazy, and sometimes it makes them, I guess sometimes it makes them so they want to be more involved because they think the country or their own wealth or their own safety or their own sort of, ethical issues are at stake. So politics in itself is a really good way to push something forward just because it presses so many buttons. And of course, that's what the Transhumanist Party has been doing. It has been pressing buttons after buttons. We've had a lot of we've had a lot of religious people come after us saying, okay, the party is just awful. What are you trying to do? Create monsters with genetic engineering and stuff like that, because basically most of the Transhumanist Party people support, designer babies, genetic engineering and stuff like that. And then you've had the anarchists who are saying, it's just another form of government. And then you've had the conspiracy theorists saying, you're just puppets of the elite. But the truth is, the Transhumanist Party is just a bunch of normal people trying to use science and technology to move the world further. And the main goal there is nothing fringe or nothing weird. It's just, I think a lot of people are saying, wow, the world is changing because of technology and science. And it's changing so dramatically that we need politicians and we need political entities that stand up and try to move with that change. I would be, surprised if Hillary Clinton, for example, goes after the topic of designer babies, because it's very, very thorny. Or what will Jeb Bush say on some of these topics? And who will stand up and say, how far should we regulate artificial intelligence, if we regulate it at all? Or what about 3D printing of guns? I mean, all these technologies challenge our sense of what the world is like. And the fact is that because the world is changing so quickly with science and technology, more than ever, we need political entities and people to stand up and try to put forth ideas. Now, it's not to say that Transhumanist Party has all the best ideas, but at least we're out there trying to create policy on designer babies. At least we're out there trying to create policy on how far we should take AI before it becomes dangerous. This is something that's very, very interesting. And I think it's for the first time because, like I said, if you really want to win an election, you can't talk about these things. Unfortunately, we're in a terrible situation in American politics where if you really want to win an election, you're best just to smile, keep your mouth shut, and try not to get in trouble. In the end of the day, it's often a matter of not getting in trouble, and that's who ends up winning. But that's not what we're about. What we're about is we want to get in the mix of things, and you're going to see this in 2-3 weeks, with our bus tour. That's at least the concept is going to be launched. It's designed to be controversial. It's designed to get in people's faces and say, well, what are we going to do about these technologies? We can't just sit back and let genetic engineering happen in China, and then America has a ban. First off, we're going to lose the economic war because they're going to develop all the technologies and people are going to travel overseas to have babies there. That's not how America has wants to do things. They want to be the leader of a lot of this science. So there's a lot of agendas that the Transhumanist Party are pushing for, even if they are controversial. I try to write about them in my columns all the time, and I try to get other people to talk to their friends, talk to their parents, talk to their teachers, whatever they can do about pushing all these agendas further. Because the one thing I can say is that without talking about it, we're going to end up just in a sort of hopeless situation. But as long as we speak about it, as long as we talk about it, we present these ideas in public, then the public's going to have to accept them. And that's why I've been so excited with how much media exposure there has been with the party, because I think a lot of the media is actually understanding that, yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we actually had Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush discussing designer babies? It's unlikely they're going to do so, even though the technology is here today. But wouldn't that be a fascinating conversation to see where the potential two leading candidates would actually, come down on it and say how they feel? It might be something that's very controversial. It might be something that makes us want to vote for them. So these are things I wish we would see more in politics. Unfortunately, we're not going to. But the Transhumanist Party is here to fill that void, and we're hoping by filling that void, we're going to grow as we've been doing, and we're hoping that by the time 2020 rolls around to 2024, the Transhumanist Party will be a very well-established machine, something that has resources, something that has supporters, something that has hopefully a few very wealthy people behind it that are saying, okay, maybe the time has come that this nation can change and not just go to one party or the other, but take in a third party and have a real challenger up front and present ideas that can get the whole nation speaking and maybe lead us in a direction that's far more positive than the direction we've been currently going. So that's ultimately why I started the Transhumanist Party, for these things that are happening. And I'm super excited because it has everything that I've sort of hoped that would happen. Much of it has happened. And it's so important because a lot of transhumanism at this point is really just having a conversation with the public. I'm a big believer that if you present the ideas even to a very Christian nation, and I'm running as an atheist, even to a very Christian nation, you're going to end up having a huge amount of people take transhumanism and embrace it. They may embrace it with their own ideologies, but they're going to say, I want robotic hearts because I don't want to die like my parents died from heart disease. And they're going to take, maybe some of the brain headsets for their kids, if it's some type of educational thing that helps their kids become more intelligent. They're going to take, robotic arms when they lose their arms in an accident. They're going to take exoskeleton suits when they've been put in a wheelchair and they're, getting immobile from old age. They'll take it all. It's just really a matter of giving them the reasons, presenting it in a way that's not offensive, but still exciting and still challenging, because no one's going to choose this overnight, especially with such a religious nation. But we can get the entire country to take on all these things, all these transhumanist technologies that we want. And I'm a believer that every single day we're gaining more supporters of it, of transhumanism. And I wouldn't be surprised if by 2020, you have a huge transhumanist-minded population that is not necessarily claiming that they are transhumanists, but saying that they believe more in science than they have ever believed. And that's a very good start for us at the party, a very good start for us at the movement to make it into the kind of bigger dreams that we have: indefinite lifespans, merging with machines, and just space travel, all the things that can come from the beauty and the power of embracing science and technology. So that's my speech, but I'd be happy for 10 minutes to take some questions if anyone has it, especially specific ones about the party or anything that you would like to ask.
Absolutely. That was a great speech, Zoltan, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to open up the floor to questions. We didn't pre-prepare for that, but for the questions, so these are completely spontaneous. And why don't we?
Who wants to go first? Hey, Zoltan, it's Chris Jeanette.
Hey, Chris.
How you doing?
And I'm going to focus
Good,
the
thanks.
camera on the person as we go through this.
Just real quick, Super PAC or some sort of political action committee, a fundraising body that can help support this. When you actually do announce, I take it, have you filed your paperwork for the official run yet? Because I think at that point, it might be more difficult in order to manage some of the things regarding Super PACs. Has that been taken into account yet?
No, I haven't filed because I haven't actually reached my $5,000 limit yet. So I will once I do that. And the other thing is, once you file, your taxes and everything have to be sent in. So it's something that's going to happen in the next, I'd say, few weeks, especially before our bus tour, which we anticipate a bunch of publicity around. But anyone that wanted to help with forming a super PAC, my problem is that I have become so overwhelmed. I had plans to do all these things and to form a lot of this stuff, but it's all beyond my reach now. I'm just trying to kind of go with it and keep up. So if anyone that wanted to do that, please do it, because the entire motion of the party is now really relying super much on volunteers and what they can do and what they can bring in. We've been, for example, we have a huge amount of volunteers now that are hopefully starting their own state parties, state transhumanist parties that belong to the nationalist parties, to the larger nationalist party. And that's important too, because they're going to get up their own website, their own infrastructure. They're going to try to get in, get people on the ballots in their own methods, and also running for local offices, which is really important as well. So it's gone way beyond where I try to even do any of that. But I wish anyone that wants to do it, please help, or please form it, or please anything you can do, because it's all necessary, but it's just so much work.
Absolutely. We're trying our best here in DC. So tonight we were supposed to have about 25. We got a flurry of last-minute notices that they'd like to watch it if we upload it to YouTube. So hopefully that's what we're going to do. We got it recorded on my phone right now, and but let's continue with the questions.
Okay, I guess mine was, are you considering a kind of, Brent writes it here, we've had some interactions on Facebook as I'm on the board of Fairlawn. But some of the questions I was looking at, I read through the Popular Science article interview, and I was concerned a little bit, because I knew what you were trying to do. I've read the Transhumanist Wager, so I had a glimpse of what you were trying to do, but I'm a little worried that some of the questions were taken out of context. For instance, one of the highlights they put for Popular Science was the technologies for helping the children, which I think you later expounded upon in the Esquire article, but from the pop sci itself, it sounds like something that others would jump on as anti-tech, like, oh no, we're going to chip kids. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, I think definitely, yeah, I get the angle of the Transhumanist Party is to be pro-technology, and I was just wondering if there's some kind of like focus line that we're going to be sticking to try and just make sure it stays pro-technology, not give any ammunition to anybody that's going like, they're going to try and like start modding kids and doing other stuff. It's like, I understand the discussion of designer babies, but some technologies, while they're really good reasons to use them, others will run with and start going anti-tech. I think everything should be geared toward pro-technology, and thus inspiring the dreams of what the technology can do clearer, so that less headlines. Because Google Cars is facing that now, the anti-technology guy.
Yeah. Well, basically, I try with almost all my policy to do the greatest good for the greatest amount of people with technology. And you also have to understand the interviews are done on they're sort of like done like here. They're on the phone, they record them, they do it, it goes through really quickly, and it doesn't always get, it doesn't always come through the proper way.
Oh.
For example, something in Esquire today said that one of my daughters woke up. The article in Esquire said that I believe that the string theory research has proven that the world is a simulation, and I actually don't believe that fully yet. I just have, but that was my misstep. That in a 40-minute interview, I made you make an error, and instead I meant to say somewhat supportive, not supportive, and there all of a sudden now I heard a number of philosophers write me say, you 100% believe that, and so the point is some stuff like that is getting taken out of context. And also, I think it's very important to realize that all this media operates on one basic premise, and that basic premise is they have to sell ads. So they're always going to try to pick out something that is a little bit more controversial or a little bit more challenging as a method to bump up that kind of controversy, which makes you click on the article, makes you send it to a friend. And it's not necessarily the way that I necessarily feel on everything, and sometimes stuff comes out a little bit wrong, or but it's such an honor to be in some of these publications, such as Popular Science or Esquire, that I would never ever write an editor and say anything about anything. And the reason is because these are people that are literally making the fortunes of transhumanism right now. So and they're going to concentrate on some things. And of course, I've been a controversial character. I've tried to pull back from that, and just my campaign and my policies are quite different than some of the things I would have advocated for in the book. Of course, the book is fiction, my novel. But so I often tell people that some of the stuff that comes out is not necessarily stuff that I'm advocating for. It's just stuff that the editors thought was really interesting to present. And they're probably right, because they want to present, they have to remain neutral. They're not transhumanists. Some of them are not even for transhumanism, but they want to give a good story, and they also want to try to be fair. So you get these articles that sometimes slant one way or the other. It's usually my own articles that I feel pretty comfortable that that's policy that I feel, at least not necessarily policy as Transhumanist Party policy, but it's policy in terms of ooh, hold on one sec. Are you okay? Go and watch a little. My daughter's a little bit sick. I don't know if you just saw her. You can watch in the bedroom, honey. So the point real quickly is that it's challenging because they're not transhumanists, they're not watching my back, and yet they're doing me a giant favor because they're covering us. So not everything comes out the way I want. Only in my own articles, and even in my own articles, like for example, the last Vice one with the photograph. I don't pick the photographs in my articles, and I think everyone's like, Zol, how could you do that to your child? First, I'm like, it's not my child, and I don't pick the photographs, but they do, and I respect what they do because honestly, they're running a business, and that's sort of how that game works. Is that they want to, everyone's got a job to protect, and everyone's got their own sense of what works. And like I said, most of the editors are not transhumanists, so they put out there. So I hope that answers a little bit of the question.
Oh, it does. I was just meaning that maybe at some point it might be smart to have like a defined set of pro-technology ones, not only that the party can stand for, but that even the larger candidates can take and run with, so they could argue pro-technology standpoint. Because you're right, we've had a large anti-science bend in the last few years in the country, and so part of my hope for what the Transhumanist Party's awareness was to try and push the other candidates towards pro-science as well. And as I say, it's more difficult to do that if they start picking apart the wrong parts of the argument. So maybe to try and craft it in such a way that the other candidates can run with it and say like, yeah, we're pro-science, and yeah, why aren't you?
Yeah. Well, we try. I try to be as diplomatic as possible. So there's so many moving parts all the time that it's kind of tough. And at the same time, one sort of like their editors, one also wants it to be a little bit challenging, a little bit controversial, because in the end of the day, if you're not that, no one's going to cover you, and no one's going to actually talk about you. You need to present something that's new to the table. But I mean, I'm so pro-science that I often tone it down, because I think people are like, think I'm obsessed with it as a rule, because I basically am almost any decision. The Transhumanist Party is formed upon the policy that technology and science can lead us to a better future in all actions, and that's kind of a general term saying that we can solve most humanity's problems with technology.
Right. Let's see. I had a quick. Let's go to John.
So I had a question. So you're running for president. That's a pretty big deal. You're already saying you're just out there to kind of stir things up, which is really great. But I think the transhumanist movement has some really great ideas. But I think we could even push this even further if you're willing to look at what technology can do for politics and really stir things up. We start talking about digital democracy, right? Because currently, not a single party is talking about giving everybody like a digital way to vote or a digital way to watch the laws. I've worked in Congress, the White House, and I've been on presidential campaigns, and I can tell you, all those people work really hard to hide the inner workings of how they make decisions, how they run our government. But with digital technologies, I think we actually have a way of kind of opening up the consensus as a way of running the country, more or less, right? So, have you thought about that? Maybe adding that to your message?
Yeah. So if you've read any of my Gizmodo things, what happened is I recently met with the founder of Futurology on Reddit, which is great because they have the Futurist Party, but they don't have the kind of they have the numbers, but they don't have a real organized party. They're just more like an online entity. So we were trying to use some of the synergize, some of the stuff we have, but one of the things I wrote about in my Gizmodo articles is that desire for us to have instant or, basically instant democracy. We vote on bills that are not necessarily being passed through Congress in an 8-month thing, but it's kind of a rolling basis. And so we are presenting some ideas like that. I plan to write a longer or more detailed article on that, but I've written about 3 or 4 articles that talk on different types of technologies that can make democracy real time. And it's the real time that I'm very interested in, because I just don't like how we have a system, and you're going to see me more and more challenging over the next 6 months, challenging the way the Electoral College works, the way that the entire system is set up only to support 2 parties. For example, I was recently had some fundraising deals to be made with some fundraisers that were coming in, and our legal attorney said, well, ethically that's not correct. You can't give them a percentage of that amount. And I said, well, we're such a small party. I'm not concerned about ethics. I'm not even concerned about laws. I'm concerned about revolution, to be honest, and not revolution in some type of militant way. But I'm interested in changing the way we get a president and we get people into, basically the government. because I think the way it's happening right now is it's totally geared towards only rich people being able to do it and only very wealthy parties being able to do it. I feel like every morning I wake up, I'm against the wall. It's so difficult outside of getting media interested to make we need to check that or redo that. And redoing it might be very easy, in fact. And that would be the other interesting thing as well, is that you could just, or there would be follow-up methods or something like that. And despite that, I totally hear what you're saying. It would be awful if we got this great right to all vote on our phones and all of a sudden the government did something, awful and voted whoever they wanted in. So then we have, but the problem is that I think I still need to advocate for using this type of technology to bring about a real-time democracy in hopes, maybe it'll be retinal technology or something else that will be able to verify and get us to the next age where we can have a closer to real-time democracy. I mean, you have to understand that as the Transhumanist Party, this sounds important for a younger generation that's just sort of fed up with how politics has been going and the structure hasn't changed for decades.
Roger that. Let's see, Zoltan, if I could squeeze in a question here. I thought it was interesting, your comment about laws and ethics at a small party. It kind of sounds like how I feel about taxes for a small business. I just don't care about them at this point. And maybe I will when my little business gets a little larger. My question was, it's a little bit of a comment and a question. The comment is, I've noticed in general the world, we seem to be converging between apocalypse on one hand, with worldwide disasters seem to be mounting, and then this promise of a kind of an age of Aquarius with this new technology, and it's basically transhumanist technology that we're talking about. Saving the planet, and it's all converging almost precisely at the exact same time. It seems almost too otherworldly to really believe. That's my comment. And if you would, my opinion is the only solution for our current quagmire is transhumanist technologies. It's the only thing that's going to save us, and the conventional politicians don't have a clue. And that's kind of why I'm on board with this. And I don't know if you've noticed a similar pattern with the world.
It is. There's so many very interesting patterns occurring. Everything from environmental destruction happening quicker and quicker, to religious naysayers saying, where the end of the world is at hand, to the fact that we are potentially nearing the end of the species with things like mind uploading, should that even be possible, here in 20, 30 years. So clearly we are at the cusp of some of the most interesting, perhaps interesting time in history. I sort of just go with it and I sort of embrace it, because I think, my entire agenda, my most important single goal is that I'm trying to live indefinitely. And I'm trying to get my family and my loved ones and fellow neighbors to live indefinitely. That once we've done that, we can kind of address a lot more of the issues later. We can then say, well, okay, now the planet's screwed, let's fix it, or let's leave this planet, or let's whatever it's going to be. But for me, the most important thing is that we need to get to a point when I can't be easily taken away from life. We can overcome basically mortality. That said, once we've done that, I think I'm much more open. I'm much more open to the ideas of whatever it is we want to do afterwards. Maybe it won't be emerging with machines. Maybe we'll say no to AI and we'll just go on indefinitely on planet Earth in some utopian society. I'm not sure. But the one thing is I'm sure of is that the transhumanist technology we have will not only allow us to live indefinitely, but eventually it will allow us to fix things that we have hurt and make other people mellow out. For example, it's going to be very hard to keep some conspiracy theories upheld in a world where people are happily living with robotic organs and not dying anymore. Then they may, and especially poor people, they won't necessarily say, oh, look, the elite have taken over. Now maybe everyone has robotic hearts and, something like that. And the same thing with environmental catastrophe. If we can geoengineer parts of the ozone layer and plant in forests back into health, we might come to a point when that transhumanist technology has eliminated that entire conversation. I just wrote an article about this, about MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and it's amazing. Driverless cars are going to probably in the next 15, 20 years take away one of America's most important nonprofit organizations that I think everybody supports. Nobody wants to see drunk drivers when they have kids.